Well, it certainly has been a very busy weekend on the news front. It started on Friday with the presidency issuing 12 shortlisted names to head up the National Prosecuting Authority, or NPA. Also, the Zulu King, Goodwill Zwelithini, was served with court papers in a bid to stop him from forcing citizens who live on land that falls, under the Ingonyama Trust from paying rent. In addition, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin, Gordhan, will meet with Public Protector Busiswe Mkhwebane on Wednesday after being subpoenaed to answer questions around the retirement and reinstatement of former Deputy SARS Commissioner Ivan Pillay. And today, the Zondo Commission interstate capture continues this week, and we'll talk about that. So our guest to unpack some of this is Xolani Dube. He's from Xubera Institute. I think, Xolani, I don't know, is it Monday or Sunday? Because I think my brain still thinks it's Sunday, but my body knows it's Monday. I'm getting all the zoos and goos mixed up. Good to have you on the show, Xolani.
Good morning, Leanne, as well as to the viewers at home.
It's good to have you. All right, so seeing you are in KZN, let's talk about the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. That, of course, it's CASAC. Other pressure groups as well filed an application at the Pietermaritzburg High Court challenging the conversion of informal land rights to long-term lease agreements by the trust. Basically, just to put viewers in perspective, the Ingonyama Trust they accuse the Ingonyama Trust of acting in an unlawful manner for allegedly cancelling land ownership agreements, forcing residents to enter into 40-year lease agreements. Is this even legal?
Look, I think what the Ingonyama Trust is doing to those people that currently are residing in those pockets of land that is under Ingonyama Trust administration, I think they are trying to revive the whole laws and the governance of fiefdom. And I think that is quite incorrect, where we are living in a constitutional country. And moreover, I think our king, or the King Zwelithini, what he's doing is an antithesis of what any traditional leader is supposed to do in the South African context. Because if you understand the history of the Zulu nation, your King Shaka, your Dini Zulu, as well as your Cetshwayo, they fought hard for this land so that this land can belong to the people of KwaZulu-Natal. And so I really don't understand why the king all of a sudden is starting to become a landlord.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at what happened in July, was that our President Cyril Ramaphosa, he assured the king that government would not touch the land under the trust. However, the big story now coming out of it is saying basically that the king is now stripping women of their rights to own land, and is forcing occupiers of land to pay rent between 1,500 and 700 rand per month. What's going on now?
Liana, look, the history repeats itself, but this time the character is a different one. You remember that in KwaZulu-Natal there was a Bambata rebellion where people were forced to pay the poll tax, and they went out and fight against such kind of an injustice. And I think the king, what he's doing is bordering on what those colonialists they were doing. Maybe he's our modern colonialist. One still has to ponder on that particular perspective. But whatever that is doing, that really seek rent from the people of KwaZulu-Natal, I think the leaders of this province, especially the political leaders, the governing party, must confront this king and inform him that, look, we are not in a fiefdom country or in a fiefdom space here or time. We live in a constitutional democracy, and certain things, if you violate people's rights, they have all the right to take you to court. And so the king must also bear in mind that he he is just an ordinary citizen, just like any other South African, that can be taken into court and be made accountable for his action. And so that's what is supposed to happen. And really what is going on, I think, is really the beginning to question this traditional institution that serve or that try to portray themselves as above the law.
Yeah. All right, well, let's park that conversation for now and move on to another story that is quite an interesting one, and that's the 12 candidates that have been announced to replace the NPA head. And this is going to be quite interesting after we saw the names that were released. I mean, we've got the likes of Glynis Breitenbach, we've got Silas Ramaite, we've got Andrew Chauke. These are just to name a few. We've got a lot. Naomi Manaka, Peter Maritzburg advocates, Simpiwe Mlotshwa, as well as a lot of the other recommended, I suppose, names on that list. But the one that jumps out at me is Glynis Breitenbach. She, of course, is a member of the DA. Now, talk to me about that. Firstly, who do you think would be suitable to take over that position out of the list of 12 candidates?
Look, I think in the past has taught us that we as South Africans, we need not to put more emphasis on the procedures, on how these guys are being selected, as well as on the people who is being selected to occupy this office. Because you will know very well that the history of this office is the most painful one. Yeah. And so I think what you have to do as South Africans is to be active and vigilant in terms of monitoring if anyone who's chosen really live up to the expectation as being prescribed by the law that govern this particular office. Because look, you put a hope on an individual, and then it's so interesting that when they occupy this office, they get hallucinated by this politician, and then they act so foolishly, to our strangest amazement, to say, how dare can a person who's professional, who occupy this office with integrity, but end up painted so dirty with so many conspiracies. And so I think we as society, what we need to do is to make sure that the civil society organization are intact, the civil society organization are really looking at the interest of us as citizens when it comes to this office, not to put an emphasis on a person who's occupying the office. Yes, there must be a degree of honorability from the occupants, but at the end of the day, the responsibility is with us, the citizens of South Africa.
So, Xolani, I mean, let's talk, for instance, about the two names, and you talk about to serve the best interests of South Africans. Glynis Breitenbach, of course, she is a member of the DA. Would that not be a conflict of interest?
Look, in the past, we had Bulelani, we had Vuspikoli, with the history of the struggle and the history that is undeniable from which political organization were they serving and were they members of. And so, as I said, I don't think really belonging to any political organization, because anyone, trust me, in his corner or in his silence or wherever, he belongs to a particular organization. Okay. And so I think when we are being called to serve in such an office, you are not serving your organization, but you are serving the South Africans. So I think to a certain extent is irrelevant the issue of a political affiliation. Okay. But what is important is the execution of justice. I'm
gonna rush you along because I know we've only got 5 minutes. I want to get through so much. I want to quickly touch on Silas Ramaite, who of course is the incumbent. He's in the acting position right now. Now, you know, what do you do? Because now he's got allegations of a sex tape hanging over his head, a sex tape where, I think it was the City Press talking about that he was caught in a very compromising position with a security guard. I mean, is that already sort of something that you do not want the NPA boss going into office with?
I think the issue of these scandals of sex and so forth must be looked in a holistic approach or in a holistic analysis. I think the public officers or the current regime is really redefining the issues of morality and ethics in relation to sexual issues. And so I think even the issue of the current acting NDP maybe might be riding on that wave of saying, look, we are demystifying the issue of sexuality and how we are supposed to conduct ourselves publicly or in our corners in relation to the issues of sexuality. And so, and he has not been proven guilty. That's another cliche that is really dominating our political space. So you and I, we can't go and say, withdraw your name because of this. It's up to him. And to say, look, on behalf of my integrity as well of South Africa, there are these allegations that still need to be proven. But for now, let me hold my candidacy of being part of this selection until maybe I'm proven. Maybe by that time, the train will already have bolted out from the train station and then will be left behind. And so that's another dilemma that he might be having. And so, but at the end of the day, is for him to make a right decision.
Okay, you talk about him making the right decision. So let's talk about our Minister Pravin Gordhan. He's also in for a massive week. We've got the Zondo Commission that's beginning. He's been asked to appear now, of course, before the Public Protector, who wants to investigate him as well. The EFF have got all these claims against him and a list of questions they want answered. Let's talk about Minister Gordhan for a moment. What do you think of his leaked document and also appearing before the Commission and the Public Protector this week?
Look, from an innocent perspective, I think he is in a very undesirable space. I've never seen a person who is becoming a villain to our society. But the question is, who is crafting this kind of an image for Pravin? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves, is that let's fine-comb all these guys who are throwing stones at him. What is it that is there for them to gain? And are these allegations really do have element of truth, or are these allegations that aim to assassinate his character and also to make them escape whatever that they are being challenged to prove that they've done? And so I think Pravin, to a certain extent, other people might say is the pillar of South Africa, and if you remove that pillar, trust me, the whole house might fall. The question is, if the whole house is falling, what are we going to see in that particular house? Are we going to see lots of dirty work that he has been doing in the institution that he has been ahead of? Or maybe we'll see a person who will fall, and then in order to protect those that or those who are currently facing the arm of the law. And so I think he is a person that the history will only judge and the truth will only be known when he's no longer there in that office. But for now, I think we are in a very painful and very confusing trip with him.
All right, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Xolani Dube, he is from the Xubera Institute and talking to us about some of the key stories from the past weekend and what's expected this coming week. Also, remember that in the Zondo Commission, we expected to see Barbara Hogan testifying, but that's in our news, and Sakina's got all of our details.